our Top 5 at 5 event on June 11th, 2020, What to Expect When You're Expanding, which is featuring Marie Roberts of Meridian Community College and RedShelf's own Gordon Elson. Just a couple of reminders as we get started. Please leave your cameras on for the ability to network and see each other as we go through the session here. But with that, a reminder that we are recording, and we will send a link to a YouTube recording of this session. If you can keep your mic on mute until the Q&A, that would be great. If you have questions during the discussion, you can enter them in chat, and we'll get to them either during the discussion or at the end during the Q&A section. If we go over time with Q&A, we do budget about 10 minutes for that. You can stick with us and listen, or you can wait for the recording to come. We'll record as many of those questions as we can. A little more about today's session. Several years into its digital materials delivery journey, leaders at Meridian Community College sense the potential benefits of evolving its approach to digital content delivery. Today, we are exploring Meridian's top 5 recommendations for any school assessing its current workflows, vendor partnerships, current and future challenges, and the cultural readiness for expansion. A little more about Meridian. It is a public community college in Meridian, Mississippi, with about 4,000 students. It is one of Mississippi's 15 public community colleges and offers a wide range of academic courses of study, including those you see here on the slide. Our special guest, as I mentioned, is Marie Roberts. She is Director of Digital Teaching and Learning at Meridian and has a doctorate degree in education from Delta State University. Marie focuses on holistic course design and development. She is currently training faculty on Quality Manners course design standards to provide a more streamlined student learning experience. Marie led the expansion of digital course materials for Meridian, so therefore you are getting this information directly from the person who lived it. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Gordon Elson, RedShelf Senior Director of Alliances.
Thank you, Steve. That was fantastic. And thank you, Marie, for joining us on behalf of RedShelf. We appreciate it. Folks on the East Coast, thank you for staying late. Folks on the West Coast, thanks for carving out some time throughout your workday to join us. We have some really strong content, and we're really excited to talk through it today. Some of you on this call may be aware, but for those that aren't, I spent my first 7 years of my RedShelf life on the campus sales team. I know firsthand the joy that you can receive from seeing a program go from scaling to expanding. And you also create some incredible visibility for your campus and your department. So very exciting stuff, near and dear to my heart. Today, as Steve mentioned, is the 5 at 5 tips, what to expect when expanding. And I think the first tip is so fun. It's so unique. It's so original. I just love it. Marie, your first tip is be a trailblazer. What does that mean to you?
So for us, it was not being afraid to kind of think outside the box in terms of what our inclusive access program looked like for our students. We didn't have to stick with what was normal. We could really kind of get creative and really think about from a holistic standpoint, what was best for our students, what worked well for our faculty and our staff. And we weren't afraid to challenge or to at least have a conversation about what's out there, what could we do differently, and how could we improve it.
Sure. That's awesome. And I think by being a trailblazer, there's probably a delicate approach when you get that persona on campus that you're a trailblazer. You don't want to confuse that with, air quotes, adding extra work for your colleagues, right? So how did you, delicately address that subject?
Yeah, so for us, it all actually came down to a very initial assessment where we went through and we really reviewed what the user experience was like for our current inclusive access program. Was it streamlined? Was it friendly? Was it student-centered? Did our faculty have a lot of challenges that they faced? Were we actually having a lot of tech support, concerns and questions come in? And so we really assessed where we were at that point, and then actually started with a survey. And so we conducted a really basic survey asking for input, some good qualitative data, some feedback, and some suggestions for improvements to see what exactly the need was, and those results really helped to validate our initial suspicions that there were some ways that we could steadily improve our inclusive access delivery.
Awesome. So when you're getting that persona of being a trailblazer, it's important to make sure that the message is that it's student focused, it's student experience, it's affordability, so that that message doesn't get blurred, which bleeds into the second point that Steve has gone to, which is assessing the need. So you and others expected and had a hunch that there would be an expansion of digital materials on campus, but throughout our conversations that we've had over the last couple of weeks, you really have always gone back to two things: student experience and affordability, right? And then the other thing is making sure that the decisions that you're making are data driven. And you actually touched on it a little bit ago, that a survey was conducted. Can you talk a little bit about that survey? Go a little bit deeper into that?
Yeah, sure. So we actually deployed a campus-wide survey electronically through our learning management system. We posted it actually as an announcement in Canvas to collect that data. And it asked people to identify their roles. Were they a part-time student, a full-time student, an adjunct faculty member, a full-time faculty member? So we could kind of get a broad-based campus input of what their opinions were, what their experiences were up to that point. Had they come into contact with our inclusive access program? If they had, what did they feel about it? How did it mimic some or other types of user experiences maybe in the retail world or maybe in the business world? And so it gave us really good kind of a starting off conversation point to take back to our campus to say, look, we see that we have some growth opportunities here, and this is the evidence that we need to support the conversations about moving forward and maybe searching out what our next step would be for expanding our program to be a high quality delivery.
That's awesome. I think it's so important to, when we want to make changes, they're obviously thoughtful decisions, but also it's so important to have data to back those. I think people tend to listen much closer to conversations that are fact and data driven than opinions, right? So I think that's a really incredible approach by your organization. And so, you wanted to learn more about the student experience through that survey and affordability. Can you touch a little bit on how you approach those questions in a survey manner?
Sure. So it actually started off with a yes or no, had they had previous experience in our existing delivery method. And if they asked yes, we asked about, was it a smooth process, or if you had to describe it, what words would you use to describe it? Did you think, was it frustrating, or was there ease of use for that delivery method? And then we also flip that on its head to our faculty, and we want them to be our subject matter experts, right? So we want them to be able to focus on their content. We don't want them to feel like they're having to be level 1 tech support. And that at that time, so many of our faculty were sharing with us that the first day or even the first couple of days of class was spent onboarding those students. And so we could see that we wanted to alleviate that from them. And so we actually hosted a SurveyMonkey based survey that was included, and we had it vetted through our IR area, institutional research area, and we were able to collect that data. We left it open for about a week so that way we could answer and have plenty of availability there. And then we took that data and we really did a hard look, and we said, wow, our students are saying this is not easy. It's hard for them to get to their materials. Our faculty are feeling like they're having to be, the front of the line support for those things. And so it really kind of helped to validate those suspicions that we had.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I was really glad to hear when we were having those conversations, you were very open to and not afraid to use external resources. You mentioned that there's a RedShelf database of customer support and tech support that you leveraged as well for your organization. So that was fantastic to hear. So through that survey, you realized with data that there was clearly an appetite for affordability and digital on your campus. So the next steps, you made it clear that you can't do this alone, and you don't want to do this alone. The number 3 is engage stakeholders, right? And you talked about how engaging full-time and part-time, both students and faculty, is important. Why is that so important to Meridian and to the success that you were trying to achieve?
So I think coming back to engaging a stakeholder, part of being a trailblazer and doing that is having supportive voices across your campus, right? So having people that have bought into the notion, they have ownership, and they feel like they have been a valued voice in the decision-making process. Our students felt that they were listened to, that we took their feedback and we really tried to apply it. And then on the other side of that, our faculty said, that we heard their concerns about wanting to be able to get started with their content from the very first day and not having concerns about students getting access to the materials or struggling with that access. They could get started with their class from the very first day. And then also from the affordability standpoint, point, one of the things that we did is we worked with our division chairs on the academic side to make sure that textbook availability would be available with our new platform, that it would be cost effective for our students, and that the features and the functionality that we were accustomed to would either be same or better with the switch. And so having those stakeholders kind of bought in kind of gave us like a organic excitement across our campus, but it also kind of had cheerleaders added to our side because we had their ownership and we had their buy-in from the beginning. It wasn't something that was pushed to them. It was actually very collaborative in nature.
That's awesome. And when I asked you a couple of weeks ago, I said, did you have any pushback? I think your exact words were, there will always be naysayers. And that's not necessarily anything that all of us want to hear on this call, but I think it's everything that all of us need to hear, right? I think we have to hear that and overcome it. You mentioned that you were one of the pushbacks that you might have received was availability of content or the pricing. How did you approach ensuring that there wouldn't be any restraints on the content by switching a vendor or expanding the program would affect the content being used by the faculty?
Yeah, so we worked really closely with RedShelf just to ensure that the textbook availability that we had with our existing IA delivery platform would be equal in our new switch to RedShelf, right? And so that was actually checking ISBN numbers across the board and making sure that those textbooks would be available from those various publishers. We are a multi-publisher campus, and so we wanted to make sure that our faculty would not have to sacrifice their academic freedom or the text that they were accustomed to with those materials. Everything was still readily available in friendly platforms through RedShelf. And then from an affordability standpoint, it's actually a straight up cost analysis. Our bookstore and our CFO, they work very closely to make sure that our students are actually benefiting from an IA program. They're saving money. We're being physically responsible for them through the IA program. They're actually spending less money than they would have on a hardback book. And so we're able to do that through that evaluation and analysis process.
Yep. And that's going back to the data and hard facts. I love it. So you mentioned that one of the stakeholders that you were involved, RedShelf brought to the table, it was the bookstore. Why were they so important to the conversation?
So honestly, for us, we were looking at it from a tech standpoint, from a user experience standpoint, but our bookstore works so closely with this material, with this content. They are the forward face, so to speak, of textbooks, right? And so we wanted their input and their value. And honestly, our bookstore manager handles so much of that, working with our division chairs and with our faculty and making sure that they have access to the content that they need. So we knew that a really close working relationship with our bookstore would certainly be necessary. And for us, it's really gone well. We've had very good feedback, and it's been a really smooth transition.
Awesome. So prepping for expansion, you're from the teaching and learning department, and so this should come as no surprise. You're largely focused on the student experience. Your number 4 recommendation is assess the current workflow. If you're going to expand this program, assessing the current workflow is imperative. How did you go about assessing the workflow?
So for us, it came down to, as you mentioned, I'm pretty data driven. So I wanted to see how often were we contacted by phone or by email or with face-to-face requests for, I don't know how to get to my content. I'm not sure how my inclusive access program works. It's not compatible. I can't figure out how to make it work. Can you come show me how to do this? And so that initial kind of just like a gut feeling, I would say like, maybe we're running into some hiccups here if the majority of our phone calls and our emails for tech support and tech tickets were related to that. And so the survey then came back to the sense of students were asking for, I want to be one button and done. I don't want to have to try to log into places or remember what a password is or have to call a 1-800 number for help. And so the survey really kind of helped validate that. And then on the other side of that, from a workflow standpoint, I was looking at response time. How quickly could the company get back to me if we needed to do a very late course edition? You guys mentioned that we're a small community college. We may throw a class out on Friday afternoon that starts on Monday, and I need that content available quickly. I need those enrollments loaded in. I need the faculty member to have access to their content. So that was a big part of me for accessing our workflow. And then easing up the stressors, so to speak, of the actual delivery. Having a platform that is that mimics real world expectations, such as like banking or shopping and things like that. It was very helpful to know that the platform that we were going with, the IA platform through RedShelf, mimicked a lot of those real world experiences for our users.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you really did a thorough beginning to end assessment of the workflow. So the point of adoption to all the way to the actual access to the content. So that's beautiful. Was your staff hands-on throughout this? Did they have access to actually experience it themselves, or was a lot of this through surveys and reports?
So one of the things that I very first did, I think Mike was with us here. He was my initial point of contact there at RedShelf, and he gave us a demo textbook that we could go ahead and load into our LMS so that I could give it to faculty so they could play in it, become familiar with the features. We followed that up with an on-campus training session for our pilot. And so RedShelf actually came to campus, and we had faculty come in, and we showed them exactly how to use it. They could ask questions. It was a first hand-to-hand rapport building exercise that really gave them the information that they needed. And then we coupled that with both synchronous and asynchronous trainings, as well as resources like handouts and videos, and links to various support information there through the RedShelf support site. And it made everybody feel kind of warm and fuzzy, so to speak, to know that they had all the information that they needed on the front end. And then if they were to run into a problem, we had all of the resources available to help them through that challenge too, which thankfully we haven't really had any. So we have all of that available, but we tried to front load the training and the resources and the information so we really wouldn't run into any problems.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really building a level of comfortability on campus,
Yeah,
and a level of credibility on campus, right? That's awesome. So point number 5, it's actually 3: pilot the program, measure, and iterate. And I don't suppose there was a survey that helped you do any one of these actions, was there?
So there was actually, you guys, if you can't tell already, I like my data. We chose to pilot the program in the summer for a couple of reasons. One, I had a smaller number of faculty and a smaller number of students, and the majority of my summer faculty were like my full-time go-to. I have their cell phone number. I can pick up the phone and ask how this is going type folks. And so we chose to pilot in the summer with a smaller population. We actually bit the bullet and went campus-wide. So across the board, we rolled out inclusive access with RedShelf that summer, and kind of every week we would kind of check in, how's it going? We ran 3 online terms that summer, anywhere from 3 to 8 weeks in length, and had good feedback across the board. At the conclusion of that summer, we did a post-pilot survey, so to speak, a post-survey evaluation, asking our faculty and our students and our staff to compare their experiences with that IA program to our previous vendor, right? And so that gave us the hard data that we needed to say, you know what, this was the right choice. We had actually like a double-digit percentage of decrease in the amount of support tickets and phone calls and emails that we got about, can you show me how to do this? We had I think it was like 26% or something decrease that summer in people needing help with their platform because it was so smooth and so easy for them to do. And so we could see that as an option. We made the decision to go campus-wide because I did not want students, if they were enrolled with us in more than one course, to have 2 different experiences in the same term. I didn't want it to be, because at the end of the day, we're here for our students, right? And so I didn't want their experience to be confusing or convoluted and have to go to 2 different places for their information. So we just decided as a college that one summer, one pilot, one platform, and we're going to see how this goes. And that honestly was the best move for us because, everybody across the board was having a similar shared experience, and it kind of created a cultural bond amongst those summer faculty and those summer students. So then once the fall hit, we had a whole other population of cheerleaders kind of along the way. Oh, I already know how to do that. It went so well this summer. Let me show you how to happen this fall. And students were excited about it. And faculty, we basically had in-house advocates at that point sharing it amongst their division.
I love that. So just to go back a moment, one of the things that you mentioned was, I think it's unique to probably any industry's definition of a pilot. So, oftentimes I think myself and others think of a pilot as having to be something that's smaller in size. But the way that you guys approached it is a pilot can be smaller in size because of a season, right? So you didn't have to do it in the fall or spring. You could make it smaller by doing it in a summer term or a winter term, something like that. I think that's really clever and a unique approach that turned out very, very well for you guys. So that's an awesome tidbit. And then, you measured off of the data, and how much iteration were you doing? Is that something that you're constantly doing, or is there a kind of a one and done scenario?
So at that time, making sure that we felt good about the transition was kind of the main focus of that measurement and adjustment process. Moving forward since that time, we continue to offer training on our Inclusive Access platform. We have it as part of our onboarding for new faculty. We include it as a resource module for all of our students, and we house that information within our learning management system. So it's readily available in every course and every division. And so the resources are made available there. And then in addition to that, with our face-to-face faculty like convocation, professional development type series, we offer additional opportunities. So if you want to explore maybe accessibility features or student study features like flashcards and taking notes and bookmarks and things like that, we'll offer very succinct, targeted trainings on those unique tidbits kind of along the way, in addition to the full plethora of resources that we do asynchronously through those types of training.
Okay, that's awesome. So that kind of actually dovetails nicely into the last one, which is we're going to do a sixth tip, and that is keep trailblazing. And what I was going to ask was, at a certain point, what you've done to Trailblaze runs the risk of being stale in its message or overdone if it doesn't get that iteration that you just touched on. So I think that's so important. How do you keep the program relevant and the message fresh to everybody? Understanding that, of course, students are coming and going on campus, right? They move on. But how do you make sure that that message is fresh and not getting stale for the faculty and students from term to term?
So I think it's just keeping the message in front of them, right? It's just having that information readily available, continuing to refer back to it. Thankfully, with the RedShelf dashboard, we have access to student access reports. I can actually validate at any given time who's logged in, who's gotten to their book, what percentage are using it, and then we can actually tie that back to student success. So anytime we have a conversation about equity and access for our students, I can say from the very first ed class, 100% of my students have access to their book. What percentage have actually accessed it and logged into it and looked at it? And so those numbers are what continue to drive the conversation beyond the initial transition to the program, right? And so that just kind of helps keep it at the very forefront of that conversation.
That's awesome. So I think your campus is really focused on continuing to utilize tools at your disposal, whether that's RedShelf Defender, if that's a publisher or other stakeholders on campus. That's an awesome approach. So Marie, we had two questions that came in before we even got started with this top 5 at 5, which is awesome. And then I think we've had some questions that came in since then. So Steve, you hold the keys to those questions. Will you take over and address those?
Yeah, let me throw out the first one. Thanks, Gordon. One question we had during registration was about implementing ebooks. How are new ebooks implemented? And what is the process each semester for advising what course and what specific book it uses?
Sure. So I actually reached out to our bookstore manager, who I think is also on the call today, and she heads up the large majority of this workflow. But she shared with me that it looks something like our faculty member has a conversation with our division chair and makes a textbook selection, right? And at that point, the textbook selection is then collaborated with our bookstore to see what is the cost that is involved. Is it more cost effective for us to deliver that in an inclusive access model for the student? We want the inclusive access to save the student money. We don't want it to cost them any more money. Is it readily available as far as the publisher and things like that? Is there a contract involved with the publisher and those types of conversations? But from the advising standpoint, what we have found, we actually notate through our SIS, our student information system. An example of that would be something like Banner or PeopleSoft, depending on your institution. We actually notate in the course name if it is an inclusive access course, so students actually know upon the time of registration if it is an inclusive access course. And we have so many students now who will actually opt for those courses because they know they don't have to have the hassle of waiting to get a book or a hardback book or something like that. They'll have their book from the very first day. It's automatically worked into their fee schedule. And so we've been able to notate that directly through our SIS, which has been helpful for advising, because anyone who works in enrollment management can say, this course is going to be inclusive access. You can see that through the course name. We actually opt to do it with a little asterisk at the end of the course. And so we know all of our classes that have an asterisk at the end or a little star, those are our inclusive access questions or access courses.
Thanks, Marie. And I just put up a slide. We are in the Q&A section. If you have a question that you'd like to ask during this time, we have time to answer those. Please enter that in chat, or feel free to unmute and raise your hand, and we'll give you some space to do that. Marie, we had another question around streamlining the IA program to remove unnecessary communications between bookstores, departments, publisher reps, and RedShelf. They're wondering if you or any stores are using a template for IA courses and what information is included in those.
Sure. So inside our RedShelf dashboard, which I'm sure like your RedShelf rep could tell you a little bit more about or show you, but we have the option to turn off or on email communication that goes out to our students, and we can dictate how early it goes out, and it will welcome them to the IA program, tell them about their information, what date they will have access it for, what course it's associated with. And so that's an automatic process. We can set up those email communication templates, and you can choose when those go out. Because we also, as I previously mentioned, denote those through the SIS. That's also helpful for our students to kind of be aware, to kind of be expecting information about that. And then we also do it through our LMS just as a resource or as a student support. So we try to hit them with at least like a shotgun approach of giving them as much information as we can for onboarding ease. But from that standpoint, your bookstore kind of, for us, our bookstore handles the actual uploading of the books to or the communication to RedShelf, and then RedShelf actually uploads them. But from the communication piece, we can pre-schedule those emails directly through the RedShelf dashboard.
Great, thank you. We had a question from Mike come in asking, have you heard instructors use their analytics in a positive way to advance success for their students, and how? And what have they liked about it, and what maybe haven't they liked?
Yeah, sure. So one like best practice that some of our faculty use that I love is by the first week of class, they typically will have something like a first day handout quiz or a quick check to make sure that students are accessing it. And they ask students to send a screenshot showing that they've opened their book so they know how to get to it, they know how to access it. And that's a very direct way to confirm that. The other thing I love about the RedShelf dashboard is at any time I can log in to see what percentage of that particular course, or drill down to a very specific student if we have a retention concern there. And I can communicate that with our retention specialists, who we call navigators, and they can reach out and call the student or text the student, email whoever, and say, hey, I see that you haven't opened your book yet. Did you know that reading your book is highly correlated to success in this course? Can we show you how to get to it? Or did you know you have access to it? Did you know that you can get it from your phone or your tablet or your computer or your laptop or anything like that?
I love that screenshot idea, is really cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
How did you come up with that? How did your program morph into having navigators that use the analytics? It almost seems like they're headhunters in a good way to find the at-risk students. I mean, that's one of the biggest benefits, certainly me as a RedShelf sales manager, that I share with partners and potential partners about the benefit of the analytics, to not only see how the students are interacting from a large perspective, but to identify at-risk students. And, I would imagine most instructors can't, email or phone call, all of the students that have access to their book only a few times. But to have a department that does that is huge. How did Meridian get this department of navigators? How did that morph into what it is now?
So our college administration really puts a priority on student success, right? Because we know that if we can retain that student and get them graduated, they are going to have a higher quality of life. So I think it starts from your administration having a really dedicated emphasis for success, but faculty can do it in the same way. It could be just as quick as an email or a message sent through your learning management system. For us, though, it's just all about being a good support network and kind of meeting the student where they are. This may be their first time to go to college. This may be their first time to take an online class or to take a class with an inclusive access platform. And so communicating on the front end how to do it, but then also following up if you see that it's not happening. So you can walk them through that. Our navigator program is, it's not necessarily unique, but it is unique in the approach that we can pull data to say, here are the students I need you to target right now because they haven't accessed their book, or they haven't even logged in, or we haven't heard from them in a couple of days. So maybe could we reach out and see? So it's a really, I'm super appreciative for my college for having those available positions to be able to do that. Certainly I can pull the data as well, just to send a little friendly prompt and say, I'm here for you. But those individuals have connections to community resources and online virtual services that really can help make a true difference and a positive impact on the students who need it most.
And is that just an additional thing that these navigators do that wasn't a department that was made in the recent past?
Yeah, no, so they're actually a function of our advising and retention office. So they handle any type of retention concern, any type of early alert, from like student preparedness and access to lack of material. So that's just one more piece of the data, or the piece of the puzzle, so to speak, to trying to get our head around how can we best help students be successful. And when we see that students are not logging into their book, you know, that's going to have negative impact on their success in the course, right? So it's just one more piece of the puzzle that they can kind of help us combat that retention issue with.
Thank you.
Thanks for those questions, Mike, and thanks, Marie. We are at time for this, and I will just invite any other final questions via chat or by raising your hand if you'd like to, if you're with us. Okay. Otherwise, if you think of anything, you can email hello@RedShelf. Of course, get more info about RedShelf that you might be looking for at about.redshelf.com. And you can also sign up for future sessions of RedShelf Connections at about.redshelf.com/connections. Saw your comment there, Stacy. Thanks for that. It was great to have you here, and great to have you all here as usual. Again, about.redshelf.com/connections for future sessions, and you will receive an email hopefully within the next 24 hours with a link to the recording of this session on YouTube.